We Saved You a Seat is sponsored by the Oklahoma Family Network. Oklahoma Family Network focuses on supporting families of children and youth with special health care needs and disabilities, as well as families who have children with a mental health or behavioral health diagnosis. Oklahoma Family Network provides families with emotional support, resource navigation, parent-to-parent engagement opportunities, and wants to ensure quality health care for all children and families by building strong and effective family-professional partnerships. I want to welcome our listeners to February and what is Heart Health Month. Today, I have with me my friend Chrissy Cleary. Since discovering her heart condition after pregnancy, she has been a wonderful voice for mothers and advocacy efforts. And today, I'm excited to have you hear her story and journey through learning about her heart condition. Tell us who you are and just a quick summary of your family.
My name is Christine Cleary. A lot of my friends know me as Chrissy. I currently work as a social worker at the VA in our homeless program. I've worked in the past with kids in therapeutic foster care through the Bear Foundation and have done some counseling and therapy with folks at some other agencies. I've been married to my wonderful husband for 23 and a half years. It'll be 24 in May. We have 3 beautiful kiddos. Our oldest just got married. He is 22 and he works for OSU doing like videography and photography. And then our middle child, she is 20. She'll be 21 in like a month. And she is also at Oklahoma State University studying to be an elementary education, special education teacher. And then my youngest is a senior in high school. He is 18 years old and he will graduate in May, and he's going to be going to Oklahoma City University and studying musical theater. We have a couple of dogs that are ridiculous and insane and keep us busy. I love Disney movies and happy endings and musicals and scrapbooking when I have time.
And babies, you love babies.
Gosh, I love babies. I can't sit in church without staring at other people's babies. It's a problem. Like I love life. Like I love watching like the older veterans I meet, who are nearing the end of their life and seeing, the fullness of it. And I love, little babies and seeing people with their little baby bumps that are pregnant. Really active at our church. We go to church in Midwest City at St. Philip Neri Catholic Church, and I help with their St. Vincent de Paul Society. We take calls from people in the community who need help with like utilities and gas and water bills. And read at the church. My husband's been involved in ministry forever. I first became pregnant a couple months after getting married. So I was about 22 years old. And that was with our oldest kiddo, Joshua. And honestly, pregnancy could not have been a better experience. Like I was at my healthiest. I'm someone who has struggled with chronic migraines my entire life, and I didn't have a single migraine the whole time I was pregnant. My body kind of adjusted to pregnancy where like within the first month or two, I got to what was a normal weight for pregnancy, struggled with the regular nausea and morning sickness that comes with pregnancy, but nothing that was terrible or awful. I felt like more energy, and my mental health was really great, just really excited about it, really happy. And, towards the end, obviously, the uncomfortability of being pregnant as you get bigger. I was in graduate school at the time for my social work degree. So traveling to school every day or doing my internships or anything like that was a little bit of a struggle. So I took a semester off of college just because it was my first kiddo and I didn't know what was going to happen. Had some uncomfortability in my back, had an incredibly long labor. Learned later on I wanted to have a completely natural childbirth experience and didn't want to use medication or anything. Well, I'm someone who has always struggled with anxiety and also obsessive compulsive disorder, so I like to control everything. And so what I didn't realize at the time was that sometimes people who struggle with anxiety can't let their body relax enough in childbirth to dilate. So I was in labor for like 16 hours with no medication, didn't dilate at all. And finally, my contractions were like every, I don't know, 30 seconds apart. And it was just like excruciating pain. Like there's like the line where your contractions are supposed to be at their highest, and mine were like way above it. And the nurse just looked at me and said, "Girl, you're either going to pass out doing this without an epidural, or you're going to need to just give in and get one because you're not progressing at all and you're in awful pain. And I appreciate that you're trying to be a trooper, but your body's just not relaxing enough in between the contractions to let anything happen." So I went ahead and agreed to do the epidural. Now, this was at a time where, you weren't really free to kind of move about and make yourself comfortable. It was like you're laying in a bed and you're waiting for, your labor to progress. So I got the epidural and like was at a 2 when I got the epidural, and 2 hours later I was at a 10. I mean, it was just like, and then several hours later we delivered him, and everything was fine and perfect. Had the normal postpartum, dealing with post-labor pains, and body adjusted well, nursed him the first year. He was extremely healthy, very happy kid, and everything was fine. And then about a little less than a year and a half later, got pregnant again with my second child, Rebecca. She's a junior in college now. And that pregnancy was also great, felt super healthy. I did have more morning sickness with her, but with both her and Joshua, had no ankle swelling or anything like that. I kept seeing other people who had that and was just like, that's odd. Why are their ankles so big? Like I never understood it. Never had that. Was in graduate school, finishing up my degree at the time. Was due in March and was set to graduate with my MSW in May. And really great pregnancy. No, again, no headaches, no migraines, which was just amazing. Really healthy, really happy, had a ton of energy, which was great because I was in graduate school, had a toddler, and trying to do all these things. And so went really well. Went into labor with her, and again, like didn't progress in my labor at all. So told them about what happened last time, and they're like, "So are you gonna get epidural?" And I said, "Sure," and that was a funny delivery because for whatever reason, they think I had a little bit of curvature in my spine. The epidural only took on one side. So I felt everything on one side, but not on the other. So I was at like a 3 when they gave me the epidural, and labor had been like 24 hours and no progression. And 30 minutes later, I was at a 10 and she was coming out. There were no doctors in the room. And I was like, "She's coming out." And they were like, "No, she's not." And I was like, "No, she is. She really is. I can feel half of her." And so nurse came in and was like, "Oh, she's coming," and kind of like held her like a football in there until the doctor or a resident or something could get there, because it was at a teaching hospital. And they delivered her. Everything was fine. It was funny because with both her and my body never figured out that I only had one kid. So I kept like producing enough milk for like all these kids. And they were these big, fat, squishy babies. They were so cute. And I could just like have them and then pump and put it aside for, when my husband was taking care of the kiddos at home while I was at school or whatever. So, super healthy, great recovery, no problems, felt great. She was born the 1st of March, took a couple days off of classes. It was spring break afterwards, and then went back to class afterwards and finished up my degree and graduated in May. Everything was fine, super healthy, no major problems. And then we moved back to Oklahoma after I finished graduate school, got pregnant a couple years later with our third, Andrew. And again, pregnancy was great, felt really healthy, felt really happy. No headaches, no major issues. Didn't even really have morning sickness with him. Toward the last like month and a half of my pregnancy, I noticed my feet were swelling a little bit, but they were like, "Okay, now you're older." By older, I was 27. So, because he was my third. But I was like, "But this is unusual for me. My feet don't normally swell." And it was, the response was, everyone's feet swells. It's very odd that your feet didn't swell the first time. And for me, it was kind of like a flag, but they just kept saying it was normal. It was normal. All my labs were normal. All my tests were normal. I felt like my blood pressure was a little higher in that pregnancy. I'm someone who runs with a really low blood pressure. Like I've always been someone with super low blood pressure, struggle with dizziness and stuff. And my blood pressure toward the end of my pregnancy was like 120 over 80 the whole time. And they kept saying, "Oh, that's normal. That's perfect." And I was like, it's not normal for me though. And that go around, I had chosen a specific doctor and birthing center because I wanted to have like a more controlled environment that was less medical and maybe I could move around a little more and things like that. And really had a great experience, but it was just kind of like there were little things that looking back now, I'm like, maybe that was a sign. So I went into labor with him a few weeks before my due date, which both of my other kids were a week or 2 weeks late. Like I always had to be induced to have them. With him, I just went into labor. We went up to the women's center, and there was a really bad snow and ice storm coming in, and they were just like, listen, with your history of not progressing, we don't want to call the doctor in and her be stuck here all night. We want to give you some, like a little something for the pain and have you go back home and come back when you're a little more progressed. Well, we couldn't get back home because of the roads, and it was just this like huge snow and ice storm back in 2006. And so we ended up staying at my in-laws' house, trying to rest. Of course, couldn't rest. Had the two kids with us, the younger ones. The next morning, I was like, no, we got to go back in. Got to go back in. So went back to the women's center and told them, I was like, here's the deal. I won't dilate without an epidural. Let's go ahead and just do it. So my doctor came in and did the epidural. I was like at a 2 or a 3, but I had been in labor like all night. Felt fine, except, labor pains. And she gave me the epidural, and then like labor just started progressing. She gave me a little something to help labor progress a little more quickly because the storm was really bad. Like businesses were completely shut down. Like no one could get out anywhere. Like it was insane. And so when he started coming, they called and another doctor came in. She was really fantastic. Great experience with her, delivered him, normal delivery, everything was fine. And then afterwards, I remember feeling more tired, but I thought it was just because I had been up all night with a snow and ice storm, getting the kids where they needed to be, going back to my in-laws' house because of the storm, just kind of anxiety about the storm. I grew up in Florida. I don't like snow and ice. I'm not used to it. It makes me anxious. So, and then just thinking about my other kids and them getting to and from where they needed to go. So I remember being really tired, and I remember my back hurting really bad and feeling like my chest hurt, like right in the center of my chest. I just felt like it hurt. And they said, "Oh, you probably pushed too hard." Well, what's odd with all my deliveries is I never had to push. My contractions were strong enough that when they came, they just came. Like it wasn't even a push. And I was like, no, I definitely didn't strain anything pushing. Something else is going on. So they literally put the, those like cold packs they give you after you give birth for areas to heal. They like stuck those to my back and my chest, and they were like, "Oh, it'll just help ease the pain." And um, but like we had to stay there for longer because I needed to be on antibiotic. And so I just kept saying, yeah, I don't feel right. Like I'm tired. My chest hurts. My back hurts. Like something isn't right. And then, and I feel really tired. And they're like, of course you're tired. You just had a baby and you've got two toddlers and that's normal. And then they started asking me some other questions. They were like, well, we see here on your chart that you have a anxiety diagnosis. Is it possible you're having a panic attack? And I was like, well, anything's possible. But normally, like this is prime time me, like me with babies and kids. Like this is when I'm at my happiest. Like I don't normally feel anxious about this kind of stuff. Like normally I'm just snuggling in and nursing a baby and like it's the best moment of my life. It's like, so they just kept saying, well, we think it's maybe a panic attack or anxiety, and I was like, okay, you're the nurses. because it was a birthing center, a doctor wasn't there unless the nurses called her. And so I kept saying, well, my doctor knows me really well. Will you at least tell her what I'm saying? And they were kind of dismissive. And one of them I could tell was even just kind of annoyed. And I heard her on the phone with her going, she's just like really anxious and her back hurts. We think she strained something. We're gonna try to keep her calm or whatever. And it wasn't like I was being like over the top or, demanding. I was just like just not feeling well. And I couldn't sleep. Like I couldn't rest. Like that was what was weird is normally, when um normally when the baby sleeps, like I can sleep or even just hold them and rest. And I kept the one thing that I noticed was my feet kept swelling more. Like my feet just kept swelling more. And I was like, well, that's weird. Because normally as soon as the baby comes out and I start nursing, I'm like, shedding pounds or whatever. Um, and my feet were swelling. And I noticed like every time I laid down, I just was coughing and not feeling well. And I couldn't quite figure out that. And I had ice packs and heat packs. And I remember looking over at my husband, who was like peacefully sleeping in the world's most uncomfortable chair. And I was just like, why can't I sleep? Like, what is going on? Like, this is so weird. And so I asked one of the nurses to come in because I was like, I just feel really lightheaded. And they checked my blood pressure, like, blood pressure's great. It's 120 over 80. I was like, that's really high for me. Like, I'm a 90 over 60 gal. Like, that's really high for me. And they're like, no, no, this is great. And then I was like, does my heart rate say it's 46? I think it says it's 46, and I'm a high heart rate person. Like I'm a 100 resting heart rate person, like always have been. And I was like, that's really high for me. I was like, can you call my doctor, or really low for me? Can you tell my doctor and tell her like my blood pressure's high and my heart rate's low and about my feet? And again, the nurse was just kind of like, this is very normal. I think it's your anxiety. And I was like, well, just call her. And I heard her call her and tell her that my heart rate was high and my blood pressure was low. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not what it is. And she's like, I've got it. I've got it, hun. And I'm like, that's not what it was. Well, I knew my doctor. Like I've known her for a long time. We had been involved in some like community outreach and even spoken to a couple groups. And I was like, this is not going to fly with her. Um, and so I called in this other nurse who was a lot older. They were getting ready to discharge me. And I was like, something is just not right. I was like, my blood pressure's high. At that point, it was like 133 over 73. And I was like, my heart rate's low. This is not normal for me. And my feet are swelling. And if your feet are going to swell, it's supposed to be during pregnancy. This has never happened before. I was like, my chest just like hurts. Like it just hurts. And she was like, yeah, they said they called your doctor and your doctor said it was okay and she'd be back by to visit you. And I was like, yeah, but what they told my doctor was wrong and they won't let me talk to her on my own. And it was still like the snow and ice storm and we were figuring out how we were going to get home. And I remember looking out the window and seeing people walking through the drive-through of McDonald's because no one could drive at that time. And I was just like, okay, this is weird. So the nurse was like, I'm going to teach you how to take your pulse and your blood pressure. And I just want you to pay attention because I really do feel like you're the best judge of your own body. She's like, but I'm not the charge nurse right now. And so she was like, you told me you've had anxiety your whole life. You know what an anxiety attack feels like. I hear you saying, like, she really heard me, but she wasn't the charge nurse. And so she taught me like how to take my blood pressure and my pulse and stuff. And she said, if anything else happens, just kind of let us know. And at that point, I was just like not feeling well. And I was like, well, maybe if I go home, I can just, see my other kids and I'll be happy and I'll rest. And so went home and, everyone had come in to visit and my family had come in from out of town to see me and the new baby. And I was just like, I just felt wiped. Like I was just tired, but I couldn't sleep. Like every time I laid down, I felt like I kept coughing, having this dry cough. And I thought, oh, I probably caught something at the hospital. And my feet kept swelling. And then I noticed like my neck was kind of swollen. And I was like, well, that's odd. But, I just kept like nursing him, thinking everything was just going to get better in a few days. And every night when I would lay down, like it got to where I couldn't lay back at all. Like I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was drowning. And I was like, and drowning is like my worst fear. So that was not fun. And so every night I would like try to sleep in between nursing. And the only time I had any physical relief was we have like a big bathtub in our bathroom. Was I would take like a bath and just get all the way down to like my chin. And it was like I felt like I could breathe when I was in the bath. And I was like, well, that's odd. And I would get up and do this at like 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. And I remember my husband being like, I mean, do whatever you need to do, but you know, most people don't want to go in the bath right after they have a baby. They're like, eh. But I was like, no, but I could breathe this way. So it was like day 11 after I had him, and I was like swollen. I felt like I looked like an Oompa Loompa. I was just like, this is ridiculous. I kept coughing. I was like, and it was like like 11th night, and I was like, that's it. I am, if I'm having a panic attack, I'm going in to get some good meds because I need to sleep. I'm tired. I hadn't slept for more than like an hour in 11 days, like an hour at a time. I was like cleaning my house like I was nesting, which is odd right after you have a baby. Like normally that's right before, and just not able to relax at all. And so I got Andrew. He's our youngest, and I just leaned over and I told my husband, hey, I'm gonna go up to the hospital. Like, I need something stronger if this is anxiety because I just can't rest and I'm tired. I was like, I'll be back in a little bit. And this is before like urgent care was really like up and running. So like there was no idea that I could just like go to an urgent care. It was like 5:30 in the morning. So I loaded Andrew up in the car and I drove to the hospital, and they brought me back, and I walked in, I sat down with this nurse, and I was like, okay, I know when I had him, they said I was having an anxiety attack. I was like, this is like the worst it's ever been. I can't sleep. I can't rest. I can't breathe. I like my chest is hurting. My back is hurting. I was like, I'm swelling. I'm not losing the baby weight like I normally do because normally it happens really fast. I was like, so can you give me like Prozac, Paxil, something strong because this is ridiculous. And the nurse just like looked at me, and she looked down at the carrier at Andrew, and she was like, honey, you're in heart failure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of We Saved You a Seat. Oklahoma Family Network promotes family-centered care and provides tools so families can make informed decisions, advocate for improved services, build connections among families, and serve as a trusted resource in health care of children and young adults. If you would like to become a supporting family or get in touch with another family, please contact Oklahoma Family Network at oklahomafamilynetwork.org or by calling 405-271-5072.